Certainly want to thank our budget team at City of Tuscaloosa. It's led by Mike Wright, who is our Chief Financial Officer, Linda McKinney, who is our Revenue Director, Susan Snowden, who's our Associate Chief Financial Officer, Carly Standridge and Katie Metcalf, who are internal auditors for the city, and Michelle Padden, plus many others who work behind the scene to help us put this budget proposal together for you. Without their hard work and dedication, countless hours, weekends, and late nights, we wouldn't have a budget proposal to you that hopefully will continue to move our city forward. So when you look at the city budget, there's a simple philosophy that we've used for the past 12 years in constructing a budget for the City Council. First is the belief that it's the blueprint of how we enhance the quality of life for our citizens. Second, it is the mechanism by which we're able to achieve our core beliefs and our standard of excellence. And third, that it has to be conservative to ensure healthy reserves and maintain our high credit ratings that we have with Standards and Moody's. So we had two primary objectives as we went into budget season. First was to create processes and the projections that continue to strengthen the management of the city's human, fiscal, and capital resources. So in doing so, there's four overarching goals that we included in this achieving this first objective. First was budget conservative revenue growth. Second was do our best to contain expenditure growth. Third was increase the amount of accounting, auditing, and technology resources. And third, isolate agency funding and capital asset expenditures into the fall. The second objective that we had was to achieve our standard of excellence by creating an integrated organization that has integrated technology. We believe by doing this we can increase transparency, which elevates civic engagement and accountability. It enhances the public's experiences with city services. It allows us to measure performance and then leverage that in our decision-making process. And then the last is to provide employees the training and resources to be empowered in what they do. So tonight, over the next few minutes, you're going to see four consistent themes in the budget presentation: employee empowerment, technology, accounting and finance, and restructuring. All of it is meant to incorporate into us achieving our standard of excellence. Now, it's important to note the tremendous growth that we've seen in Tuscaloosa. If you look at the chart, you will see that since 2005, we have grown by over 15,000 residents. That's an increase of 18%. In other words, we grew by the city of Coleman in the last 11 years. This is tremendous growth by any city, and we are currently one of the fastest growing cities in Alabama. So keeping up with this pace creates a set of challenges, and there are 7 primary challenges that we face during this budget season. First is the increased health care cost. Second is the insufficient amount of revenues needed to address the myriad of services that are provided by the city, and especially playing catch-up since the April 27, 2011 tornado. Third is the unmet infrastructure needs, again, especially when you look at the recovery zone, where we had nearly $800 million of unmet infrastructure needs, and we're provided $64 million to address that. The unfunded mandates that continue from Montgomery, we especially see that on the transportation, corrections, and mental health side. How we allocate the resources as part of the restructuring process, the application of technology across multiple disciplines, and then how do we continue to make the investments in quality of life and infrastructure overall with one of the lowest sales tax bases in Alabama. Here are a few budget basics that you all know very well. We're in the season of adopting a budget and implementing a budget. Then hopefully, around September 30th of 2017, we'll have a surplus. And then that surplus will find its way into the general fund, RFFI, and then that money will then find its way into infrastructure investments. Primary infrastructure investments done on the general fund side come from the surpluses that are generated through the operating budget. Today, within the general fund RFFI, we have $19.7 million available. This was created by years and years and years of surplus transfers. You'll also see during the course of the budget special revenues. Now, sometimes these special revenues have budgets. Other times they're just line items that you will see during your budget. The vast majority of the time, these sets of special revenues are for specific needs and can only be spent for specific purposes. Rarely are they allowed in continuing operating expenses. Water and sewer, same process, except instead of taking the annual surpluses, being an enterprise fund, we use the percentage of unrestricted net assets as a way to then transfer into our reserve fund for future improvement and ultimately take those dollars and invest in infrastructure and capital needs. As of today, we have $21,407,000 in our capital funds. The majority of that, like with the general fund, reserve fund for future improvement, are encumbered. So, the budgets that we're recommending to you tonight is $145,330,770 general fund budget and a $52,209,895 water and sewer budget. The total combined of these operating budgets is $197.5 million. This is the largest budget in the city's history. Finally, before we delve into the general fund, I want to give you a picture of what our reserve funds look at this point. These are undesignated reserves that we have on hand to deal with emergencies that may occur. And to give you some sense of how it's important, because many cities can talk about a rainy day, we certainly experienced it. During the course of the tornado, we had to cash flow over $40 million. So having the amount of undesignated reserves available is very important when you face a crisis and you need immediate cash to deal with that. This total combined reserves that you see listed on your screen, that gives us the immediate availability to deal with any emergency. These are also codified by code, and certainly our team can provide you more information over the budget season. So let's take a look at general fund. You have before you under the history slide the last 5 years. This year we see roughly a 6% increase in the general fund budget, which is holding pretty steady over the last 2 years. Of the general fund budget, when you break out the revenue sources, you see that 53% come from sales taxes. This number is consistent with prior year, and that 78% of our total revenues come from sales taxes, business licenses, and ad valorem. So as these go right here, quite frankly, that's how the city is going to go. We have 6% in others, which you can see broken out right here, 4% in lodging tax, 4% environmental, 4% in the water sewer transfer, and then 3% from the commercial rental license. But again, sales taxes, business licenses, property taxes, those are the main revenue line items that make up the city's budget. Now I know what you're interested in is what's the money you can deal with? What's the money that the council has the ability to obligate beyond the special revenue sources that are out there? Of the $6 million roughly increase that we see in the general fund budget, there are $3.8 million worth of major discretionary revenues. So you can see that this gives you then the ability to appropriate the money, and we certainly have recommendations for that tonight. But before we get too excited about that $3.8 million number, the pay increase and the health insurance cost alone absorb over $1.8 million. So that leaves the council with about $2 million, and departments made over $7 million worth of equipment and vehicle requests. So that is a challenge that you will see as you go through the budget process. So as we go in and we break out the city sales taxes, we're estimating $36.8 million for fiscal year 17. This nets out the incentive agreement that we have with the shops of Legacy Park. As of today, this is a 0.5% growth factor. Tomorrow morning, we will know whether it's actually even or greater, depending upon what our collections are going to be for August for the sales during the course of July. But right now, based off today, this would be about a 0.5% increase from prior year. Talking about incentive agreements, we currently have 3 major ones that are in place. First is the Shops of Legacy Park. When you less out our agreement of, we anticipate $130,000 net this fiscal year. When you look at the Embassy Suites, we're anticipating a $365,000 net out, and on Hotel Indigo, a $180,000 net out, for a net new revenue of $676,000. It's important to know, though, that the Embassy Suites, and the logo is not showing, but in Hotel Indigo, those are lodging tax sources. Real quickly, because I know you've seen this slide several times, but I think it's really important to show our bosses at home exactly what we do every single day. The table that you see listed are the 20 largest cities in Alabama by population, and they are sorted by their city sales tax rate, what the cities actually collect. 25% of our general fund revenues and nearly 40% of our discretionary revenues come from sales taxes. That 2% is really how we butter our bread at the City of Tuscaloosa. So as you can see, if you compare us against our peers, we have the lowest in Alabama. So I like to call this achieving more with less, but it never hurts to look at how we fare against our peers. So if we had the City of Mobile's tax rate, we would have an additional $55.2 million in our budget. If we had Huntsville's, we would have an additional $46 million in our budget. If we had Auburn, we would have an additional $36.8 million in our budget. If we had Montgomery, we'd have an additional $27.6 million in our budget. And if we had Hoover, we would have an additional $18.4 million in our budget. This is achieving more with less, and quite frankly, something we should celebrate. Now, from time to time, I know that we do have people that travel outside our city and come back and say, well, Mobile has this, or Auburn has that, or Huntsville has this. Well, it certainly would be a lot easier with their tax base. They have higher taxes, and that certainly enables them to be a little bit more creative than what we can be at the City of Tuscaloosa. Just so you know, 1% of sales tax this year equals $18.4 million. Moving on to county sales tax, you will see a pretty significant increase here. That is due to the Transforming Tuscaloosa County legislation, which will go into effect for the entire 12 months of fiscal year 17. It's been in effect the last 3 months of fiscal year 16. The Transforming Tuscaloosa County legislation created a permanent 3-cent countywide sales tax, of which the city received 19% of, County Commission 14.3%, C Schools receives 20%, the county schools receives 25%, and the highlighted portion there is the 10% from the Road Improvement Commission, which you're all very familiar with, and then you see DCH and City of Northport listed down below. This was a step in the right direction and certainly is going to accelerate over the next 20 years over $200 million worth of infrastructure projects in our community. It'll also mean a step forward in terms of providing more resources for the city. This year we project that the new 3-cent tax, or our share of the new 3-cent tax, will generate $16.4 million. The new revenue we estimate around 15%, or $2.4 million. We're recommending to the City Council that we take 70% of that 2.4 and we allocate to the 2016 bond issue, which will pay the $35 million worth of improvements we recently went to the bond market, and that dedicate another $738,000 towards vehicle and equipment purchases. Moving on to business license, this year we may actually fall below prior year's collections. We certainly have a few more days to collect business license, but for the most part, they've all been collected at this point. We do believe, based off analysis, that we can budget a small increase of about $200,000 in the fiscal year 2017 budget. Certainly that may be something that the Finance Committee will want to take a look at. Ad valorem continues to increase, and the Revenue Department has done an outstanding job of basically hitting this number in the last several years. Ms. McKinney felt that 14.5 was a doable number. To be conservative, we budgeted 14.4. I certainly hope that Linda is right and I am wrong, and that number will come in a little bit higher during the budget year. Building permits, we're going to go off prior year. This is a number, again, that can hit or miss and can vary greatly between something that gets pulled on September 25th or something that gets pulled on October 4th. Again, at this point, we feel that 1.9 is a very conservative number. Looking at the expenditure side briefly, you can see that police, for the first time in at least my history with the city, has actually been beaten out in terms of having the largest budget in the city. But in the police department's defense, we had to combine 7 departments together to make that happen. Infrastructure and public services is the largest department of the city at over $30.5 million in projected expenditures, and you can see the police second. I've highlighted agencies for you. Again, that is a considerable amount of city funding, and that's those discretionary dollars that we talk about. Agency funding is solely those discretionary dollars. So when you look at percentage of budget, it kind of gives you an idea of where the city invests. You've always heard that saying, the money is where your heart is. Well, 45% of the city's budget goes to public safety. That's pretty significant. When you take a step back and you look where we invest our money, fire and police are where the heart of the city's resources go, and for good reason. The cornerstone of any community is this ability to provide security and safety, and certainly the city is doing that. Overall, when you look at the expenditure side, 57% of the city's budget, total budget, including the special revenue sources that you see, are going into salaries, fringes, overtime, and holiday pay. In terms of a real number, that is $83.2 million that will go into salaries and benefits, by far the largest expenditure of the city. After that, you can see that others, which make up a large portion of our in and outs throughout the budget, agencies, debt service, which we'll get into in a little bit, and other small sections of the city's budget. So, getting into salaries and benefits, I know we had an interesting discussion last week, and one of the things you asked me was to take a look at our pay plan and take a look at what we've done and what we may want to do in the future. So I went back and looked at, during my course of time as mayor, what has been our recommendations for employees. Since fiscal year 2006, if you're a public safety employee and exempt, there's been a 41.8% increase in salary. That is 25.3% in COLAs and 16.5% in step movements. Now granted, you've got to put an asterisk here, because if somebody's topped out at step 20, then they may not have gotten a step increase. Under non-exempt, 34.3%. Again, the 25.3% in COLAs and 9% in step movements. Interesting, when you go to the Social Security website and look at the average mean index over the same time period, the average rate increase for a full-time employee is 25%. So you can see that the city has far exceeded the average median income, and then if you include average wage income, it's even higher. Median is a much higher percentage within the Social Security analysis. So certainly the city has gone far and above national averages. In addition, the city has also created a retiree health insurance program for employees ages 55 to 65. This was done during fiscal year 2010. So what are we recommending this year? We're going to recommend full implementation of the pay plan. But in some ways, this is a little hollow. There is not a COLA increase this year. This is only the second time in 12 budgets that we've had this happen. It happened one time earlier in fiscal year 2011. So implementing the full pay plan will mean a 3% for most of our public safety and exempt, and a 1.5% for our non-exempt. But juxtapose that with what it will be coming, and that's a 14% increase in health insurance rates. As of today, our deficit within our health insurance fund is $496,000. That cost will be borne by the City of Tuscaloosa and not the employees. So we're running that far behind on the insurance budget for this fiscal year, and the council will have to make a determination whether it wants to prepay that in this fiscal year or just incorporate it as part of the surplus transfer in next year's budget. The cost to the city of health insurance is $1.24 million. So that's our 70% of the health care cost. The employees will be dividing up an increased health care cost of $510,000. So as you can see, that health insurance costs are taking probably the largest percentage hit on this year's fiscal budget. We're recommending as part of my budget that we continue to absorb nearly $200,000 in taxes that were added by the Affordable Care Act. Those will not be passed on to employees. The city will eat that amount as well. As part of my budget recommendation to you, we're recommending as part of the restructuring the upgrade of 27 equipment operator seniors from grade 9 to heavy equipment operators grade 12. Total cost will be $88,421. This is part of the restructuring to make sure that all employees through all former departments are up to a level so that we can continue to elevate. You remember one of the things that we talked about is restructuring. It's going to give a lot of people a lot of opportunity to move up. So for 27 employees in our environmental services, this is going to be a real good opportunity for them to move up in terms of pay from a grade 9 to a grade 12. The other thing that you're going to see as part of the budget process is we're working very hard to empower our employees. There's a strategic focus by us to invest in employee education and give them the tools to be empowered. We're recommending a 15% across the board increase in education and training for our employees. If you look at every study, every document that is, or every seminar that's done on how you empower your employees, training is the #1 thing that comes to mind. We don't have to look any farther than what fire and police do. They have some of the most robust training programs, and we see it pay off every single day. All of our employees deserve the same opportunity, and we're going to be making that a cornerstone of this year's budget in terms of empowering our employees so that they can continue to step up, earn more by doing more. In terms of vehicles and equipment, I mentioned to you there were $7.3 million in requests. We believe we have found an avenue in which to fund $2.2 million. It's important to note that my recommendation only contains the budget amount. You as a council this fall will determine the exact vehicle, not only the amount, but the exact vehicle purchases as well. But that'll be done after we adopt the budget in September and most likely take place sometime around October or November. In the meantime, whatever this amount is decided by the council will be transferred into our public works capital and public safety capital funds. Fuel costs continue to decrease, which has been a net positive for our budget. We're recommending a 10% increase based off prior year. We certainly do not have the crystal ball that can forecast what we believe is going to happen. We believe this is a safe bet. Last year we put about, I believe, $2 per gallon on unleaded and $2.25 for diesel. We're recommending a 10% increase on top of that. We're also recommending that we dedicate $289,000 of the undesignated Alabama Trust Fund money to go into facility improvements. We certainly have some issues within PD and some fire stations, but we have facilities needs across the city. This will help bolster existing budgets to help elevate those needs. We're also recommending 8 new positions within the city's budget, a cost a little over $350,000. You will see a common theme, accounting and finance and technology as part of this. We, unfortunately, since 2011, have not had the capacity to invest in accounting needs and technology needs because we were dealing with the aftermath of April 27th and 12.5% of our city being destroyed. The council made the right decisions. You had no choice but take your available dollars and invest where your city was hurting. But we've come out of that shadow, but coming out of that shadow means we have to play catch up with these needs that we have across the city. I certainly believe that by investing into these positions, we can continue to elevate and continue to meet our standard of excellence. The budget also includes a new expenditure of $420,000 for the Gateway. We're also recommending a $200,000 increase for para. We, by agreement with the Parks and Recreation Association, must subsidize any shortfall at the Tuscaloosa tennis facility. We will be likely making a budget amendment for fiscal year 16 and also including what we believe will be the 17 shortfall in this year's budget. We also have a recommendation for an additional $5,000 for the sister cities. This was to assist with the celebration that went on this prior week with Narashino, Schorndorf, and Sunyani. The budget that I'm presenting you has a current contingency balance of $402,134. We're recommending that PARA, the library, tourism, IDA, and the Tuscaloosa City Schools, if they accept funding from the City of Tuscaloosa, that they must participate in the Tuscaloosa Builds program. We believe that agencies, these agencies in particular that depend upon our funding, that they need and should participate in this worthwhile program. And certainly, as we're doing with the city schools right now, we'll help administer it for them. But we believe it's a great opportunity to booster our minority-owned construction businesses in Tuscaloosa County. Moving forward with garbage, trash, and recycling, we're recommending a $1 per month increase or a $12 annual increase. We expect that fees generated by environmental services, will generate the expenses will be $5.7 million. I'm sorry, I've got that transposed. $5.7 million are the fees we expect to collect this upcoming fiscal year. The expenses we anticipate being $6.8 million. This leaves us a deficit of $1.1 million. That will be taken out of the general fund. The city has historically subsidized some portion of the Environmental Services Division's budget. It's also important to note that this does not include equipment purchases. In this year's budget, Environmental Services have requested $1.5 million worth of equipment purchases. So today, excluding equipment purchases, we are subsidizing $394 a month. If you include equipment purchases, that number jumps to over $9 a month. So that is our recommendation with environmental services. Let me begin a discussion on debt. Currently, our debt at the city is $105 million. Our legal debt limit under state law is $245 million. With a margin of about 100, that leaves us a margin of over $187 million. Our current debt service is $9.298 million. Our debt service is a total of 6.4% of total budget, which is less than last year, and quite frankly, most municipalities would love to have a debt service number of 6.4%. Our low debt is one of the reasons why we have such a high credit rating. So in looking at our debt, we see some opportunities to help us make up some ground that we lost from 2011. We currently have two existing bond issues that are up for refunding, the 2007A and the 2009A bond issues. Now, Mike Wright wanted me to make sure that you understood these numbers are based off today. Right, Mike? Where Mike's out there, okay? These numbers could fluctuate depending on market forces that none of us can control. But we are recommending that this fall that we go and refund both of these bond issues into certain capital investments. If the market today is what we realized, it would be a potential savings of $4.15 million, this number that you see here. Our recommendation to the council on how to spend these dollars would be to create the Project NASCAR Sinking Fund, which we'll talk about in a second, technology upgrades, and vehicle and equipment upgrades. These two things here ultimately would be determined by the City Council in terms of budget and what is purchased from technology, equipment, and vehicles. So the Council would have clear discretion over that. Most of you are aware of Project NASCAR. Those at home may not be. Project NASCAR is the city's code name for accelerating 3 ALDOT projects. The city would manage these projects, take out the debt for these projects, and ultimately be reimbursed by the Tuscaloosa County Road Improvement Commission. These projects include Highway 82 and Hargrove Road, McWright's Ferry Road, and Martin Luther King Jack Warner Parkway. This confusing spreadsheet that I have in front of you is the first 6 years of the funding plan by the Tuscaloosa County Road Improvement Commission. You will see here, this is the line item for both Stillman here and McWright's Ferry Road. There's no funding in 2017 by the Road Improvement Commission for these projects. We do have funded the Hargrove Road Highway 82 project at $1.75 million. The funding for McWright's Ferry and Martin Luther King will begin in fiscal year 2018. The city, over the last few years, has invested several $100,000 in the preliminary engineering on both Martin Luther King and McWright's Ferry Road. We believe as a team here that those projects need to continue going so that they can get to construction as soon as possible. So to do that, we're recommending the Project NASCAR Sinking Fund. This would take $750,000 of unspent debt service money from this year. This was a line of credit that we had established for the purchase of fire trucks from last year's budget. Thanks to the great cash management of our team here at City Hall, we were able to pull the money out of existing cash and not have to expense against the line of credit. So we could take that $750,000, combine it with the debt refunding proceeds of $1.1 million, and give us a combined total of $1.8 million to keep those three projects that I referenced earlier moving during the course of this fiscal year. So in other words, what you would see is the city fronts the cost of the project, city submits the invoice to the Tuscaloosa County Road Improvement Commission, and then the Road Commission reimburses the city for the cost of the projects. And then the money goes back in there, the sinking fund is replenished, and funding is available for future drawdowns. The city has vast experience with this. In particular, the downtown renewal projects were all done through sinking funds that were created. Ultimately, Project NASCAR in fiscal year 18 or 19 will provide a $1.8 million savings account that the council at the time will be able to invest in how it sees fit. Moving over to the Water and Sewer Operating Fund, our budget mirrors pretty much what you've seen the past couple of years. As you know, this is an enterprise fund, so the expenditures actually, expenditures actually exceed revenue. When you take out the depreciation amount, our expenses move down to $43.2 million. If you look at the revenues, you will see a 2% increase. That's what we're recommending on the Water and Sewer Fund. It's a minimum amount that will cover infrastructure investments and the salary and health insurance increases that we're experiencing in this fiscal year. Really no more, no less. Our main sources of revenue are water sales and sewer sales. Water sales are the predominant at 53%. We continue to see a steady climb in our water sales. I'm really pleased with this. One of the concerns that we had coming out of April 27th, 2011 was losing thousands of customers and then having these thousands of properties rebuilt with more water efficient utilities. And so you'd have the effect of losing those customers for a time and then less water drawdowns once it was rebuilt. But the continued growth of the city has allowed us to really minimize our rate increases to continue the progress within our water and sewer department. Sewer sales continue on a steady increase and probably is more predictable, quite frankly, than our water sales. So when you look at us compared against the rest of the state, you will see that we have the third lowest water and sewer rates in Alabama. And I certainly believe that is something to be commended. As with the city sales tax rate, we are providing a high level of service at very low cost to the people of Tuscaloosa. When you break out our expenditures in this year's proposed budget, you will see that our plants take up the preponderance of the expenditure line items. This is something, though, I do like to point out each budget year. $591,000 investment that we make in Lake Tuscaloosa each and every year. Lake Tuscaloosa has the capacity to draw down 250 million gallons of water a day. We currently only draw down about 30 million gallons a day, even during our peak times. Lake Tuscaloosa will continue to serve our community for the next 100+ years. It's an amazing resource, but each year we do have to invest to ensure its vibrancy for the future. When you break out the expenditures in terms of percent of budget, you'll notice that depreciation, which will go unexpensed during the course of the budget year, makes up 29% of our budget expenditures. This number right here is the debt service for water and sewer, which is the largest portion of the budget. When we took office back in fiscal year 2006, this number was 33%. So we have made a significant gains in lowering the amount of our debt service, which has kept our water and sewer rates low and has allowed us to invest back into our infrastructure. The first bond, or the only bond issue that we've taken out during my time as mayor, has been the SRF. As you recall, a $26.6 million state revolving loan issue, with $21.2 million going into sewer projects and $5.3 million going into water projects. The good news, again, by great cash management by our finance team, is that we did not spend $585,200 of debt service. What we would recommend to the City Council is we take this number, we move it over into a sinking fund, and we use it as a drawdown in the upcoming year. By creating these sinking funds, it enables the city to move forward with these projects, not have to draw down a line of credit, which means we do not have to pay interest. So it's a great cost savings for the City of Tuscaloosa. The last major change that you will see in the water and sewer budget is how we expense back the general fund. As most of you know, the city is actually a rarity across the state in the fact that the mayor and city council also control the water and sewer authority. In most cities across Alabama, there's either a rural water authority or no sewer, or there's a water board or sewer board or both combined. So they don't run into the issue of how do you expense out services that are provided by a non-water and sewer employee or entity. This is certainly something that each year we have to create a methodology to reimburse our general fund for services that we provide on behalf of water and sewer. So, with the restructuring, we no longer have a water sewer department. A water and sewer employee is expected to work on storm drainage, and a storm drainage employee is expected to work on water and sewer. There are no more lines that bifurcate the two funds or bifurcate the duties of the employee. But how do you expense all of that? Our team figured out a methodology where they're going to charge back 12% of the water and sewer fund back to the general fund for expenses. This is based off looking at prior year data and including our capital fee as well. This 12% comes out to about $5.4 million, which is roughly about $900,000 higher than prior fiscal year. Now, all of this has been putting 5 or 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack. And certainly I know for the public at home, there's been a lot of numbers that have been thrown out. But something that this council should celebrate and that I think is really great about this city is that we take the time, both publicly and individually, to really dive into the budget process itself. I believe that this council has no greater duty than its fiduciary responsibilities to this city. Ultimately, it's your job to make sure that we as a staff here are spending the taxpayers' dollars wisely. The other thing that I commend the City Council for doing is that you examine this in a very transparent and public way. So from tonight, us putting our budget out there for the world to see, to the next 3 Tuesdays, which you will dive into our budget and help us make changes, additions, deletions, or even new recommendations, the public can be involved in the council's deliberation. So beginning Tuesday, September 6, 2016, the budget hearings will begin. They will be held in the Doherty Conference Room. They will begin at 8 a.m. and end around 12:15 p.m. But as you know, these tend to go longer. I know Ms. Almond's over there smiling because she understands, certainly as chair of the finance committee. On Tuesday, September 13th, we'll be reviewing these departments as well. This one, although all are very, very important, to me this is going to be one of the most exciting because the technology upgrades that we hope to be investing in the city, we certainly believe can help us transform what we do every day and help us achieve our standard of excellence. And then on Tuesday, September 20th, we will review these departments and have a budget wrap-up with hopefully the council adopting on Tuesday, September 27th. Again, I want to thank our budget team for making this happen. I'm nothing but a mere spokesperson. They are the ones who do the heavy lifting when it comes to the budget itself. We certainly look forward to working, Ms. Allman, with the Finance Committee and Mr. Taylor with the entire City Council as we proceed with this budget. What I would encourage the Council to do, now as you've digested the first kind of overview of what we're proposing, is that any questions or ideas, if you want to submit them to Ms. Allman and have her submit to our finance team, submit to me directly. But let's go ahead and move forward so we can begin having the research necessary so when you come on Tuesday, we're able to make sure that we make good use of your time. Your budget books contain a lot of detail. I hope that you will go through that. Again, ask a lot of questions of us, but as much notice as you can give us, certainly help us be prepared when you come next Tuesday for the budget hearings. So on behalf of our team, thank you very much for your attention. I know we've created a long meeting, but I appreciate your patience. Thank you.